We come here today to remember a man who faithfully followed the vision given to him, who struggled, who needed time to think and pray, who worked and lived and loved, and who saw his dreams shattered, who knew he was likely to die for what he believed. A man who proclaimed God's kingdom, a man who died a cruel death. On this day, we look at the cross, and we remember the betrayal of friends and its consequences, the casual cruelty of Roman authority and execution, how unreliable others proved to be in a crisis, the difficulty of staying open to God's new movements. On this day, we also remember that bigotry, cruelty and betrayal, and the idolatry of the empire are still very much part of our everyday lives, that our hearts still desire a scapegoat to provide redemption for cruel gods. On this day, we long to embrace these lessons for living. Do not avoid contact with suffering or close your eyes before suffering. Do not maintain anger or hatred that would lead others to their demise. Do not live with a vocation that is harmful to our world. Follow in the faith of Christ. Look upon the cross.
When the lines are drawn, when your What a peculiar thing to say in a song. Look upon the cross. What a peculiar thing to ask of you tonight, or to ask of anyone anywhere. For those who cared about Jesus, followed him until this point in his life, they either could not look on, as is the case of most of his closest followers, or they looked on in deep anguish, terror, and mourning. Are these our only options? To either flee from this grotesque display, or to stare in trembling disbelief? Probably so. And you are here. You have not chosen the former. Why would we subject ourselves to the remembrance, to the reenactment of the death of somebody? There is a way, of course, of making that make some sense. We are surrounded by stories in our culture, likely in part to the events of tonight, of people sacrificing themselves for the greater good. It's a trope in many Hollywood films. And while these stories may be sad, right, evoking within us a small sense of loss as this character passes away, they also evoke pride and appreciation. And we call those who sacrifice themselves heroes. But these heroes are often very different than the image of the cross. Consider the great heroic death of our time, Tony Stark's Iron Man, who takes death upon himself to thwart the intentions of Thanos. And yet, right there, we find a relatively handsome Robert Downey Jr. with trimmed goatee, battling the forces of evil alongside his friends. A battle that, of course, continues in one form or another even after his demise. But this is no example of the cross. That scene and others like it is a far cry from the words of the prophet Isaiah, words used by early followers of Jesus to describe their experience of his death. There were many who were astonished at him. So marred was his appearance beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of mortals. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom others hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him of no account. Surely he has borne our infirmities, carried our diseases, yet we accounted him stricken, struck down by God, afflicted. But he was wounded because of our transgressions, crushed because of our iniquities. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, he did not open his mouth. By a perversion of justice, he was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? For he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken because of the transgression of the people. Who could have imagined his future? There is no heroism on display here. There is betrayal. There is weakness and evil on full display. There is oppression and injustice. We contend in the Christian tradition to glorify the cross. We can lay on top of it all of our theological niceties and nuances and let it mean something for us. But tonight, we must only see it, be unsettled by it, be tripped up by its absurdity, feel our cheeks redden with the shame of it all. If the snapping, gauntleted finger of an avenger is no example of Christ, where can we find one? Elie Wiesel opens up to us a possibility. The SS hung 2 Jewish men and a boy before the assembled inhabitants of the camp. "Where is God? Where is he?" a man behind me asked. As the boy remained in agony, I heard the cry from the man again, "Where is God now?" And I heard a voice within me answer, "Here he is. He's hanging there on this gallows." The cries of those whose worship of idols led them to brutality said to Jesus, "He claimed to follow God. Let God save him now." But God could do no saving because God was there. God was on the cross. God was agonizing, and God was dying. Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But there could be no answer. No balming, soothing presence assuring that all will be made well. Because God was there. God was on the cross. God was agonizing. And God was dying. This is no lovely sacrifice of medieval ideas of economy. This is no transaction between God and Jesus. This is the brutality of a man beaten mercilessly, scorned, mocked, and stripped naked, hung in shame for all to see. How can we look on? It is difficult. There is an awful scene in the film Jojo Rabbit, where a young German boy during World War II, excited to serve the nation in service to the charismatic leadership of the Fuhrer, is mothered by a woman who is part of a resistance movement. And as they are moving through the town square one day, they are confronted with the hanging of other dissidents. He turns away, as any natural inclination we would have would lead us to do, but she takes her hand, and with the sternness and love of a mother, turns his head back to those on the gallows. "Look at it," she tells him. Why? Why should he have to look at it? Why should we have to look at it? Because it is the truth of all there is. And it is the truth of who we are. We have done this to Jesus. We have done this to each other. We have turned away time and time again, crying out, "We have no king but Caesar." And God's life is extinguished again and again. But it is also the truth of what we can be. The stories of the crucifixion from the Gospels display for us a sky turned black, an earth that shook to its foundations, and a temple veil torn in two. For at the cross, whatever kind of ground we thought we stood on, whatever religious protections we thought we had, or favor we thought we had earned, are undone. Whatever we believed was the bedrock of our existence, whatever guidance we were convinced was ours, these are undone at the cross. And we are faced with no ground, no guidance, other than the face of Christ. Twisted in anguish, yes, but softened with love and mercy. Hands pinned down, and yet somehow reaching for everyone looking on, hoping against hope to gather them together, hoping against hope that they might move forward in a new way, free from the need for crucifixions. But we have not moved too far past the need for crucifixions. And so we must continue to look. We must let ourselves be undone by the cross. Slow to load meanings of comfort and ease into it, letting it stand for us as what it will be for us. So tonight, listen deeply, fiercely, intentionally, connecting yourself with what is said and what is sung. We do not have bulletins. We do not have an order of service. There is no guide for tonight. You will be led through readings, through the journey of Jesus emotionally towards the cross. You will hear the events from the biblical narrative surrounding his death. You will hear songs that will attempt to draw your contemplation towards what the cross can be. Whatever it is that you experience, and I don't know what it will be, do not turn away from it. There is nothing to do tonight but to look upon the cross.
Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer.
We remember a man who had dreams of what he might be, that his people would be set free from ideas and images about God and the world that enslaved them, that people would believe that embracing their vocation of human kinship would intimately connect them with the sacred, that his people would live in peace, in God's presence, all the days of their lives. We remember a man driven by those dreams.
Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion?" said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
We remember a man who had real moments of breakthrough, when it must have seemed his vision was being realized. The times when people truly listened and responded. The men and women who were prepared to walk with him and follow him. We remember a man brought to joy by his success.
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree.
We remember a man who learned of the cruel death of his cousin. He got into a boat, seeking a lonely place where he could be with his friends to absorb the shock, to grieve quietly, and to move through the feelings of powerlessness and frustration, to contemplate the course of his own future. We wonder what he prayed about that night on the boat. What surge of faith helped him leave that lonely place and go forward to confront his life and vocation, rather than retreat into isolation and safety? We remember a man driven by his convictions.
Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him.
Beside the shadow of a frozen chapel, under the marriage of the cross and crown, outside the privilege of the chosen ones, the image of God is sleeping on the ground.
We remember a man whose dream was shattered, who broke down and cried over the city, knowing what could have been, who knew the pain of failure and powerlessness, who knew what it was like to feel broken and terribly alone. We remember someone human, just like us.
After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff, and they spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him.
We remember a man who knew he was going to die, who gathered with his friends, knowing it was for the last time, who spoke to them once again about what he deeply believed in, who wanted them to remember him and to build the world for which he worked so hard. We remember his testament to love.
And they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him.
We remember a man in whom all the fullness of God dwelled. We remember this man, this God, crucified, abandoned by his friends, taunted, despised, enduring a shameful and agonizing death. We remember a man crying out to God without consoling answer or heartfelt presence to help him. We remember a God torn apart at the very core.
At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And with a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God.